We're really excited tonight to have Ricky Roy with us also. Ricky Roy, if you're not familiar, has a YouTube channel called 2-Bit DaVinci, where he talks about everything tech. And he just knows more than the average bear and has a great way of presenting it. And he was lucky enough to be at the Ford F-150 Lightning event recently. So he got to see it up close and personal and actually was able to, I think you took I know you took a ride in it. Were you able to drive it also, Ricky?
No, no drive, just a
Okay.
drive along kind of a thing.
Okay, good deal. All right. Well, without further ado, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so it was a really major honor for us. We were not entirely sure why they called us, but we weren't going to fight them on it, and they invited us to their unveiling of the F-150 Lightning. So we were actually out there about 10 days before the unveiling, and they held it at their Michigan proving grounds in a little north of Detroit in a city called Romeo, Michigan. It's a super cool place. It's where all the F-150s and Mustangs and other cool cars go through the paces and all the validation testing and torture testing to make sure that they're certified for sale to the public. So we were out there. I had no idea what to expect because I figured there's going to be 100 people from the media, kind of a thing. And I was a couple of minutes late because I was wrapping up some day job work before at the hotel room before I got over there. And there was traffic, of course, everything compounded. But by the time I got there, I was like, all right, so where's everybody? It was me and one other person. So it was two of us at the entire event. It was like 10 of their engineers. What was really cool about this event was it was their engineering teams. It wasn't like media people or like PR people. It was like Linda Zhang, their chief engineer on the program, and all the engineers that work on this day by day. And they gave us kind of a full rundown of the truck. So it was really a cool honor, and I was very happy with Ford for that opportunity. So first and foremost, I think one of their really big takeaways and one of the things that they were the most proud of was this idea of having this truck that this big battery in your garage that you could rely upon in the event that anything happened and the power went out in your house. So the first 20 minutes wasn't even about the truck as a truck. The first 20 minutes, they were just talking about this undisclosed battery size, but they mentioned that the truck is capable of outputting about 9.6 kilowatts continuously, which is a huge amount of power. That's enough to power pretty much everything in your house. You can turn on an air conditioner or like a double oven. You can charge your other EVs. You can pretty much do everything. And that number is pretty critical because I have a Tesla Powerwall, and my Powerwall is about half that. My version 2 Powerwall that I have is about 5 kilowatt. And because it's 5 kilowatt, that's not enough to power, especially the little spike you get when you turn on large motors like the air conditioning, things like that. So for that reason, when they install the Powerwall, the first thing they'll do is they'll take your circuit panel, your service panel, and they'll pull out all the circuits that they can back up, the ones that will be able to be run on the Powerwall if the power were to go down. So the first day of a Powerwall installation in the past was just like it was a full day of two people pulling out all the circuits out of this panel and installing it into a sub panel. So this subcritical loads panel would be backed up by the Powerwall. And so, for example, in my house, the air conditioning, my electric double oven, and the car charger were the three things that were not backed up. So if SDG&E, you guys are talking about SDG&E, if the power were to go out, those three things would not work, but the Powerwall would kick in pretty much instantaneously and power everything else. The future Powerwalls, Tesla is going to up that output to 7 to 8, I think, kilowatts. And one of the really big reasons why you should do that is because you can get away from having to do all this extra work for having a sub panel. So the Ford F-150, very similarly, can pretty much power your whole house. Now, there's probably somebody in the audience who has like a 5,000 square foot house with like 3 air conditioners and stuff. Like, yeah, you might have a situation where it's not possible, but by and large, for most people, the F-150, if the power were to go out, could power your house. And on top of that, it can also power your job site. So I'm not a person who's ever used a truck for work, but for people who use their truck for work, imagine that no matter where you go, you could plug into the 110, and there's even 240 volt plugs in the back of the truck. So wherever you go to work, you could power your air compressors and your chop saws and all your tools that you run your businesses on. So that same 9.6 kilowatt output applies to the back of the truck as well. And then they showed the front, and they kind of showed the kinds of stuff that they were focusing on. It was pretty telling because I think you can really see the difference in where their priorities were compared to like someone like a company like Tesla. Tesla is always showing off like 0 to 60 times and like how fast it is and their cool UI, all the cool stuff. But I think Ford is very pragmatic. They were talking about 300 miles of range-ish, backing up your power to your house, vehicle to home in the event of a power outage, and the front trunk, which is massive. The front on the F-150 is a really cool bit of engineering. I don't really have anything prepared. It was a little bit of I'm in the middle of some travel and some tweaking, so I wasn't able to prepare anything else, but you guys can go look online. The front and the faux grill, there's no real grill, there's no radiator to take in air for a big gas engine, all kind of is one piece, and it opens up. It really feels like the trunk in most sedans. It's wildly roomy and easy to access. In trucks like the Rivian and the or I don't know about Cybertruck actually, but in the Rivian, you have to reach down in to the compartment, which isn't so bad for the Rivian because I think the Rivian rides a little bit lower from what I remember of it compared to the F-150. But this is much more comfortable loading with the F-150. So that was pretty cool. So they were really showing off those kinds of things because I think what they were trying to think about was who's buying this truck. If it's a person who's historically had F-150s, then they're going to want to appeal to those kinds of people. And it was actually at this event when I saw the F-150, because actually when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it looks identical to the truck Ford gave me to drive to the event in, a gas F-150. But I think that was pretty deliberate. I don't think they're trying to get, like a car that stands out or is different or anything like that. And it was at that moment when I realized I have a reservation for a Cybertruck. If I got my Cybertruck, I would be getting attention wherever I go. If I were to just go to the grocery store to buy a gallon of milk, I'd be that guy in the Cybertruck and people would all be looking at me. And it kind of dawned on me, I'm not that kind of a person. I have a white Model 3 for that reason. My favorite color is red, but I got the white because I don't want attention. So the F-150, I think, is probably going to appeal more to traditional conventional truck buyers. And I think the Cybertruck will appeal more to people who maybe didn't really eye trucks as a car that they'd want, but the capabilities of a Cybertruck are just so vast that maybe they're going to get new converts to the truck industry. So the next thing we did is we did a little test drive. There were 3 circuits, and I did the off-road circuit first. So this is where they do all their off-road testing just to make sure everything's on the up and up. The entire truck has a completely enclosed underbody skid plate. So the entire truck can be supported by the underside of the truck, and the batteries and stuff are all secure. And the gentleman who was doing the test drive made it a point to show that off because there were several times when we were doing like rock crawls and we were hitting these huge bumps and we were smacking the bottom of the truck into the dirt and into the earth and into rocks and stuff. That was kind of my first question is, there's this really delicate battery down there, and yeah, no, it's really well designed for that and made for that sort of purpose. So the off-road track was really cool. The very beginning was the only part of the entire day where I was like, I had that holy crap, I was kind of scared moment because he was going what I felt was way too fast for gravel roads. It was like a rally circuit, and he was just flooring it through there, and he hit the brakes and he comes around, and that felt like uncomfortably fast. But the truck handled it like a champ, and felt like it was a Subaru WRX or something. So that was really cool. The next thing I did was with the chief engineer, Linda Zhang, we did a high-speed circuit. So this is their, this big test track they have where they hit max speeds and stuff. And she was just, pull over and not even pull over, just stop and just stomp on it and do 0 to 60 runs. And 0 to 60 happens in about 4.5 seconds in the truck. But what was really impressive is it feels so planted. I like sport sedans. I drive a performance Model 3 because I like the sport, traditionally German, some Japanese, but like sport sedans because they're very low to the ground and they handle really nicely. And Teslas and all electric vehicles take that to another level. And the F-150 was the same thing. Driving an F-150 felt like you were driving a Mustang or something. It was like you do a quick, quick steering correction to change lanes at 80, 85 miles an hour. And the car just felt like it was on a rail, as opposed to the gas truck I rode in, which just had so much body sway, and the center of gravity was so much higher. It was a night and day difference. There's not active suspension, I don't believe. I think there's no active suspension. That could change, but I don't think there is on the truck. But there is independent suspension in the rear, which is a brand new thing for the F-150. And all that kind of adds up to by far the best driving F-150. And I had a 2021 hybrid F-150 that I was driving before for an hour to the event and after. So I had this really great contrast of gas truck, electric, gas, and it is shockingly night and day. The other thing that stands out the most is my gas truck had a 10-speed gearbox, which was infuriating. It felt like the truck was constantly like trying to find the right gear, going 50 miles an hour in like light traffic. The truck would go from third, fourth gear to ninth and everything in between. And if I was trying to change lanes and speed up, it'd be jumping 2 and 3 and 4 gears back and forth over and over. It was I started to realize, I think what I hate most about the gas engine is the transmission more than the gas engine itself. And in the F-150 Lightning, it's just a 1-speed like all of our electric cars are, and it just does what it's supposed to do at all speeds and does it really well. So the driving characteristics of that, like high-speed driving, is going to shock truck people. And I think when Linda Zhang stepped on it, in my mind, what I wanted to tell her was, anybody who doesn't drive like a Tesla is going to be like screaming when they feel that like instant torque rush. But I mean, my car is like a full second quicker. So I was like, yeah, this is great. This is what I want to see. But it wasn't until I got into the gas truck and realized how much slower that thing was that you could fully appreciate it. So any truck people are going to love this thing. It's just wildly different. There's no generational change that's ever happened to the Ford F-150 that's going to feel like going from anything before to driving this truck. And the final thing we did is a little towing test. And by the way, all of these were done by the engineers. So the off-road was done by this off-road experience engineer. He spends all day thinking about the off-road experience of the truck. The towing truck test was done by a towing experience engineer who spends all his time thinking about what it's like to tow and all those cool gadgets and stuff like the tow assist, tow hitch assist software and stuff they have. And so we had a 6,000-pound trailer behind us and we were towing it, and I kept looking back to make sure that it was still attached, because it was no different than it was on the other two experiences that I had. All three just felt like it just felt effortless. The truck barely even felt like it was trying, which is, for all of us that love EVs, you know how electric motors are. The numbers don't like jump off the page at you. I think it's like 575 horsepower and maybe like 680 pound-feet of torque, or 750 pound-feet of torque. But I mean, the end result is staggeringly good. I was very, very impressed with it. The starting price is around 40,000. I'm not sure exactly what you'll get for that, and I don't know how much more you'll have to pay for. Like, I'd be curious, what's the cheapest long range variant? I haven't done the math on that. Maybe somebody here has, but it should be pretty competitive with the Rivian and the Cybertruck. And I think those three are going to emerge as like three really hot commodities. I don't think Ford is going to be able to keep the Lightning in stock very much. And that kind of led into what I brought up to them as well. We've talked since then. The challenges I see are in software, how good is your range approximations? And okay, so Alex says that the long range starts around 53, which sounds about right. Okay. So the challenges to my mind are going to be, so Ross asked about the impact on towing. I'll bring that up here in a second. So the challenges to my mind are going to be the software. How well are you integrated with the Electrify America and all the other networks? And how accurately can you predict range? I recently had an ID4 for about a week, and I drove it to the Bay Area and back to San Diego. And the ID4's computer got me stranded because it took me to a charging destination that was not operable. It wasn't open yet. And I had 30 miles of range, but I was 40 miles from the next or the previous charge stop. So for that reason, the rest of that trip, I didn't trust that computer at all. I had my phone and the EA app and the charge point app and all these different things, but whatever the car said, I completely ignored. Whereas in my Tesla, it's been 100% perfect over 22,000 miles of road tripping or whatever it's been. So that trust and those kinds of things, Ford knows they got to nail it, because you got to trust your tools. The minute you lose faith in your tools, as a person who works with these things, that'll be when you start to look to get it traded in. So they know that. The second challenge, I think, for them will be, some of the tech like the self-driving, they call it Blue Cruise, and they're doing it all in-house, which was interesting. And it has radar, medium and short range radar, and it has a full camera system. So it's kind of a computer vision solution to self-driving, no LiDAR. So kind of like what Tesla's doing, but how far along are they and stuff? That's information that I'd have to ask them and find out more about. And finally, the third thing would be the dealership network. I remember when I met a friend of mine who had a Mach-E, he had to talk down the dealer who had this truck from a $10,000 markup over MSRP, and he haggled it down to only $5,000 over MSRP. And that is bonkers, which is absurd. I fear the same will happen with the F-150, because that's going to be a really cool truck that a lot of people are going to want. All the way from like people who like the Lightning, or sorry, the Raptor, those kinds of sport truck people. This is probably the better truck overall. And so it's going to be, yeah, those are the challenges. As far as the range goes, it's going to be, the range is something that we need to kind of remember. So EPA range is wildly varied. It doesn't really mean that much. The hybrid F-150 that I was driving that day, I think they told me the EPA on the highway is 25 miles. I was by myself with not even a backpack, nothing in the truck, and I was getting 18 miles for the entire 70 miles that I drove. That's wildly off from the 25 that they said I'd get. So I don't put too much faith in that. It really, unfortunately, matters though for EVs. My 300-mile Tesla, I've never gotten 300 miles in my life. I think 250 really is the real world range for my car. So companies are all over the place with this. Tesla, I think, tends to be very like overpromise and underdeliver, is be my experience. I've done polls asking people what their average watt hours per mile is, and most of them don't hit it. What will happen to the Cybertruck? I'm hearing some people talking about a Cybertruck. In fact, let me pull up the chat. I think I can do that while I talk to you guys. Yeah, there we go. So the Cybertruck, when it says 500 miles, is it going to be like my Tesla Model 3 where it's really 410 miles? I don't know, right? But with a Ford, I can tell you this, they're going to underpromise and overdeliver. And it comes down to one simple thing. If somebody's buying a Ford truck and they say it says 300 miles of range and they've been driving truck for the last 30 years, they're going to be wildly disappointed if it does anything less, especially with any sort of medium hauling or anything else. Whereas like us, I think Tesla owners, I'm not worried about it. I've never complained to Tesla that my car gets 50 miles less than advertised. I don't mind it. I love my car. It's like a rocket ship race car that's cheaper than a Prius to fuel up. So I don't mind it. But I think Ford F-150 owners would. That's the sort of thing I think they'd be back at their dealership complaining, this truck you sold me, you told me to get 300 miles. I'm not getting any more than 220. So I think their pack is going to be big. And I think they're going to get better than rated range, which is a business choice each company has to do. Like, for example, I know 3 people with Porsche Taycans, and all of them tell me their real range is about 280 miles. And Porsche's official statement is 200. So if you guys don't know how the EPA range thing works, companies self-report and the EPA goes, yeah, that's reasonable. It's kind of just like that. So if like the person who was doing the Taycan test, they were driving and they were like, yeah, I'm at 200 miles, or my 10-mile trip says projection forward. Yeah, they say approved. But I think, again, Porsche owners, they're thinking they're going to race them, they're going to be tracking them, they're going to be flooring it. And so they wanted to underpromise and overdeliver. So the Taycan, it does not get 200 miles of range, like everyone says. Like if anyone who knows a Porsche owner, you know that's complete BS. So this gets down to like the business part of it. And one thing that I think Ford will probably hit on. So that pretty much does it for me. So let me just kind of, if there's any questions, please jump in, and I'll kind of go back and read. Somebody was saying that I disagree about the Ford being practical. So vehicle to home. So Robert, I'll tell you this, man. if the Cybertruck doesn't support vehicle to home, I think that alone is enough for most people to rather have the Ford. And I think it's that important, especially when you think about what can happen when, I mean, climate change is making everybody's lives harder. In San Diego, it's constant fires and this and that. I had 3 power outages with SDG&E last year. One of my really good friends, Robert, who lives in Houston, and you know what happened there. They were without power for days. I think he had no power for 3 or 4 days. So tell a person like that you don't support vehicle to home, and they're going to have a very strong opinion about the practicality of it. So Robert, not everyone has $1 million to buy a Tesla and a Powerwall and all this stuff. So that's just not the reality. So that's good for you, but I mean, people come from a wide gamut of backgrounds and financial situations. But that's why Tesla doesn't do it, because Tesla wants you to buy a Powerwall as well, of course. So Jill says, my Model 3 is rated at 240 and does 190. Yeah, I actually hate how Tesla does this. It really irritates me because I've had 2 friends who told me, who me having my channel and stuff, ask me these questions, and I tell them, yeah, get the long range, you'll get 300 miles. And they tell me, hey, I think my car is a dud. I'm at 242 and I got to go charge. I'm at 5%. Or something like that. So I've heard that far too often. Tesla needs to reevaluate their kind of their PR, if you will, how they approach this. The German way is always like under promise, over deliver. I remember historically, like BMW 3 Series, always they'd say they have 300 horsepower, but it was really 343 the minute you got it onto a dyno. That sort of approach, I think, is far superior to what Tesla does, which is the opposite. Alex says, the F-150 looks like a great truck. Did they provide any information regarding production numbers? No, I think they're still sorting that out. And this gets to the elephant in the room. Tesla's got a really good lead on battery supply. They know what they're doing and they've got a good plan. For Ford, it's kind of the opposite. They're now at the mercy of SK Innovation, who are fresh from their legal battles with LG. And they're kind of at their mercy. If other companies emerge and say, we want battery supply too, well, Ford is going to have to share, right? So those numbers, I don't even think they fully have them in hand. And then you kind of pile on top of that the fact that we have COVID and all these shortages of all sorts of key elements in supply chain. It's going to be tough, right? It's going to be tough. So how easy was it getting into the back? This is a huge crew cab truck. It's massive. Like my wife and my kids, like this could absolutely, 3 doors in the back, absolutely. It's a huge, huge truck. The bed is 5.5 feet because of that reason. And the Lightning will only come in this configuration. It'll come in the biggest crew cab with the 5.5 foot bed, I believe. So it's practical. Somebody mentioned the Cybertruck has a 6-seat. So it has 3 in the front, which is really cool. There's actually a lot of times when I don't need an 8 or 7 or 8 passenger SUV. I just need a 6-seater. So that's a cool part about the Cybertruck that you're not going to get with the F-150. Robert says, agree about the vehicle to home argument and expensive Powerwall, but Tesla can do anything. That doesn't mean they would or they have in the past, right? There were Tesla owners in Texas who had cars in their garage that they couldn't use. So that's not, I don't know if that makes sense really. I mean, we can say that about anybody. Anybody can do anything. There's nothing stopping them, I guess. Yeah, you're right. By the way, the bed is shorter as well. Another reason, not as practical as a Cybertruck. Well, I don't know if that makes sense. The Cybertruck, calling the Cybertruck practical is kind of silly as well. It'll be really hard to maneuver in urban settings or like in the city, like trying to park in parking structures and parking garages or parking spots. It's going to be really tough and tight. So practical is a term. Robert is clearly a Cybertruck fan. Good for you. That's awesome. I love that. I have a reservation for one. But there's a lot of different people out there with different needs and things. And we now live in a place where we have a lot of different options. Lifestyle people have the Rivian. We should take a moment and think about that for a second. We live in an era where there's 3, and then if you include the Hummer EV, which is a little more money, and I'm not really a huge fan of that one, with multiple pickup truck electric options, which is pretty cool. And the F-150, the best-selling vehicle in America for 40 years, has an electric truck. So this is a huge moment for the industry, I think. So, which is pretty cool.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ricky. That was awesome. And for anybody that has not checked out Ricky's YouTube channel, his Ford F-150 video and presentation is, I think, one of the best. I think it is the best that I've seen.
The channel is called 2Bit DaVinci. Really quickly, I was going to say, I am going to reach out to Ford to see if I can't. There's a lot of questions that people have had about towing and stuff. And if I can get more access or do anything else, I'll share it on the channel. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ricky.